This week, the main passage that we're looking at is when Jesus feeds 5,000 and he has the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and I think we're all pretty familiar with that. What was so exciting for me when I was looking through the passages this time is some of the things I found that are in this passage are things that I have never thought about before with this passage that is so incredibly familiar. And I think that has been my favorite thing about preparing sermons for this. First of all, it dives me deep in the Bible, and I'm making time for it. And y'all, that is hard for me to make time for that. There's stupid, silly television that I want to watch, right? Okay? Yeah. I'm getting a really big nod up here on the front row. Thank you. It has been this amazing deep dive into Scripture. So what I want to talk about today, and I'm so sad that Olga is not here because I want to talk a little bit about language. What was described in something I read is called Jesus. What Jesus is doing in this passage is more than just setting up an example for how we will proceed with the Lord's Supper. It's prefiguring the Lord's table. Jesus is also trying to teach the disciples that there are 2 different kinds of languages that we can speak. One is the language of abundance, and the other is a language of scarcity. So kind of what we're going to be focusing on, the big picture where we're going, is that scarcity asks, what do we have or not have? But abundance asks, what can Christ do with whatever it is that we do have? So here's our scripture, and I put the color came back, right? I had a handful of people who said, excuse me, color. So I said, okay. So we're talking about scarcity and abundance, and this is our whole passage. And then the passage also has a central idea. And later on, like near the end, we're going to pull Isaiah back in, the Isaiah 55 passage back in, because Isaiah is doing the same kind of thing in that same passage. And growing up in the churches of Christ where we did not have a lectionary, this has been a super exciting thing for me to get in there and read those passages and figure out what's going on, why pick these passages and put these passages together. What's going on with that? So this is what I came up with. So the scarcity, all right, where the disciples are speaking a language of scarcity, are the places where I have this orange, okay? Because no red. I don't want to put red up here, okay? So it's orange, and then green is where Jesus is speaking a language of abundance. And then the sort of core of the passage, and this is the part that I was the most familiar with because this prefigures the Lord's Supper, is this part where Jesus, once he has the loaves, he blesses them, breaks them, he gives them to the disciples, and then the disciples disseminate them out. So I'm going to read through this. That kind of gives you a picture, all right, of where the passage is going, and then we'll read this together. Matthew 14:13 through 21. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. We're going to talk about what he heard here in just a second. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. One thing that I did on here was I added the looked up. So we have the blessed and broke and gave, I think, are really important. I had it looked up because Jesus looks up, blesses, and breaks, and then gives to the disciples. Okay, so basically the overall pattern that we see is Jesus withdraws, the crowds follow him, the disciples see scarcity, but Jesus reveals abundance. And isn't this lovely? Absolutely love this picture. Painting. Okay, so the first thing that we see in here, I think that it's important in this whole discussion about the language of abundance, is that the first thing is that compassion speaks first for Jesus. All right, so the central idea is that Jesus begins with compassion before he performs a miracle. And things that I noticed that I thought were important are that Jesus withdraws after John's death. This is after the death of John the Baptist, and I had to go back and look at that because when I first read this, I was like, wait, what did he hear, right? It's the death of John the Baptist. So this is not a small thing, right? This is a huge thing. He is mourning the loss of someone so close to him, and he's trying to get away from the crowds. That's why he's going off to a place by himself. He's trying to get away so he can grieve. And he sees them, and he has compassion on the crowds, and then he heals their sick. So, Jesus withdraws after John's death. The crowds follow him. He sees the people before he feeds them. And then compassion becomes, and one of the sources I read called this the first miracle. And I thought that was really interesting because that doesn't really seem like a miracle to me, but if I were grieving someone that close to me, it might be a miracle. If I turned around to a whole bunch of people who were following me that I had just tried to get away from so that I could grieve, it might be kind of a miracle. Okay, I thought that language was really interesting. So something for us, I think, that we can see is that we too can choose to see people before problems. This is difficult for me. This really spoke to me. Okay, this idea of seeing people. I see people, but I need to see people before I see problems. All right, and when you have as many daughters as I did and as many grandkids as I did, there's a lot of problems. Okay, so I need to learn how to see all of these, them as tiny little adorable people, or grown big adorable girls, or my husband is this big adorable man, okay, or myself, all right? So I need to start seeing people, and I liked the way that this was phrased, was see people before problems, okay? All right, because people bring problems, y'all noticed. Okay, now next we get into this language of scarcity, which is what the disciples are speaking, all right? Matthew 14, 15 through 17. So the disciples interpret the situation through a view of scarcity. They look around, and the first thing they think of is, we don't have anything. This is a desolate place. These people are hungry. We don't have anything. We need to send them away so they can go get food for themselves, okay? So I think things to notice is the deserted place, the hour is late, send the crowds away. We have only, fill in the blank, okay? Every sentence here in this language of scarcity focuses on limitation. Maybe not even just lack, but like limits. They put limits on the situation, on the problem. So for us, what I thought was really interesting about this is that where have I been saying I have only 3 weeks left until school starts? Okay, till school starts. I'm still working all the time trying to get ready for the fall. Instead, I could say, Lord, what can you do with this? What can you do with these 3 weeks that I have coming up and that I am preparing to meet my students and try to battle the misuse of AI in my classroom? How can you help me do that? Instead of, dear Jesus, there's only 3 weeks. Okay? All right. Then Jesus comes back in again with this language of abundance in Matthew 16 through 18. Jesus refuses to let scarcity have the final word. And I really like that. I've used that phrase before that I read, that is Jesus refusing to let something have the last word. Okay, so Jesus says, look, this thing comes up, don't stop there. One of the greatest things that a professor ever told me in grad school was, I'm telling her about my argument, and I'm telling her what I want to write my paper, and she said, Carole, take it one step further. I was like, okay. So then I started thinking about how I could take my argument one step further, and that's how I found the thesis statement, argumentative thesis statement for that paper. I have carried that with me all the way in my life, and I tell myself that constantly. How can I take this one step further? All right, I think this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, look, you're stopping at scarcity. You need to take it one step further. They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. Bring those things to me. Bring those loaves, those fish. Bring those to me. One of the things I read about this particular passage also that I thought kind of applied to me, that might apply to us, was that our faith begins by bringing whatever it is we have to Christ. Whatever it is. Right? I don't happen to have 5 loaves and 2 fish on me currently, maybe later. So whatever I have, I can bring, and I can give that to Christ. Another absolutely lovely painting. Okay, so then we get to this central part of the verse, which is where it has always landed for me in the past, is that this is a prefiguration of communion, is the blessed, broken, given part. Okay, so the central idea, this is in Matthew 14:19. So the central idea here is that God's abundance flows through hands that have surrendered to Christ, who have said, what can I do with this? Instead of, I'm lacking these things. And as much as an extrovert optimist as I am, I have those moments where I'm just like, this is awful. And I'm just going to stop right here and be awful. This is just untenable. Okay? I can't. No, can't. Can't. Okay? I have to pull myself back and say, wait. I need to not let those problems or those things have the last word, right? Which is what Jesus does with this language of abundance. He doesn't let scarcity have the last word. That really spoke to me. Okay, here are some things that I noticed, okay? Jesus takes, right, the bread from them, he blesses it, he breaks it, and then he gives it, not to the people, he gives it back to the disciples, who then, practicing a language of abundance, give the food to the crowd. I thought that was really interesting because Jesus didn't start giving stuff out. He then gave it to the disciples, who then gave it to the crowd. Exactly. That's exactly right. Thank you. So for us, we echo these words, these same words, at our table fellowship of Christ. We echo those same words. We take, we bless, we break, and we give thanks to God. We give hope to each other. We give things back. We accept and then spread this language of abundance. Also, that, loved when I found this right here. Japanese origin. Anyway, I got super excited when I found that one. Okay, next, everyone was satisfied. This is Matthew 14:20 through 21. God's generosity exceeds human expectation. So what I was noticing here is that everybody ate, everybody was satisfied. There were 12 baskets remaining, so notice we went from 2 and 5 to 12, okay, right? Obviously, abundance set in a nice little chain for us, okay? Everybody ate, everybody was satisfied. 12 baskets remained. Abundance is God's signature. Pulled that straight from something I read, okay? Love the idea of abundance as the signature that God is working in that act or that thought or that moment. I just love that. I thought that was really applicable to me. So kind of for us, we can trust God's generosity more than our own calculations. I'm going to share something with you. My husband is about to retire. His shares in his company are going to be bought out, and someone owes his company a very $500,000 or something, and they haven't paid, and that is directly going to affect how much Brent gets, okay? Directly. And it's going to be a really big hit. And Brent's telling me about this, and I am getting madder and madder and madder, because my husband deserves everything, and he should get that, and they should give it to him, and I don't care what the thing is, they should just give it to him anyway, right? And my husband is looking at me, and he says, Carole, there's still so much. And he's right. We have plenty. We have plenty without his part of that $500,000 that people will eventually pay, that he will not be given his part of as a shareholder. Okay, y'all, I was so I felt bad about myself. I'll be honest. I really felt bad about myself because we are in such good shape. I was not thinking about the fact that he already has this great money that he's been building and building and building and building for almost 50 years working at this place. Okay? I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at this one thing that's gonna, language of scarcity, modeled it right in my home this week. And my husband, who is the introvert opposite of optimist, pessimist, who is the pessimist in our relationship, is all over here being optimistic and abundant, and I'm over here going, do I need to go talk to this guy? Do I need to talk to the president? Because you deserve that money. And he's just looking at me like, back it up a little, sister, okay? All right. Anyway, God's generosity is more than our own calculations. It took me a minute to understand what this meant by calculations, but it's how we add things up in our head. I am thinking, again, with Brent's retirement, I'm thinking, I'm doing all these calculations, and I'm like, that's not fair. It's not enough. And then Brent is doing, God has been so generous with us. We have been so prosperous. We have been so blessed. He was really nice about it, but I think he wanted to say, right? You know, wake up, sister. We're good. Okay? So, Isaiah heard this language too. And I fought with which of these two passages to do. So when I started putting this together, and one of the sources I read through mentioned that Isaiah goes through the same kind of thing in this passage, I got super excited. So this is how we're going to kind of wrap up things here in a second. He talks about the same thing, scarcity, abundance, central idea. So Isaiah 55, 1 through 5. Eat and drink what truly satisfies. Hear, everyone who thirsts. Come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. So again, in this passage, this just dropped straight into what I wanted to talk about with the other passage. We have scarcity, we have thirst and no money, not bread, not satisfy, right? But then, woven into this, we have that language of abundance. Water, buy, eat, buy, without money, without price, for free. Eat, good, delight, rich, covenant, steadfast, love. That's all the language of abundance. And then we have the central part, right? Again, this lovely, I love when this happens. 4 little pieces, just like in the other one, there were 4 little pieces, okay? So, what Isaiah is saying here is incline your ear. Come to me. Listen and live. I love that. Last night I was nervous about today, and so I just did that. I inclined my ear. I came before the Lord. I just stopped talking, stopped thinking, and just started listening, and felt very renewed. Okay, so overall, I think where I'm going with this is, which language will we choose to speak? Because we do have a choice. We can choose which of these languages we would like to speak. Every day we choose whether our lives will be shaped by scarcity or by the abundance of God's grace. The language of scarcity says, we have only this. We count what is missing. We fear there won't be enough. We focus on limitations. The language of abundance says, bring them here to me. Trust the one who provides. Believe grace is sufficient. Look for God's possibilities. So I think to put all this together for us, what spoke to me, especially with my fear that my husband was being cheated and that we wouldn't have enough when he retires, right? When fear says, we have only this, remember Jesus' invitation. Bring them to me. We can choose to speak the language of abundance. So I have a closing blessing for us, and I noticed earlier that sometimes I call prayers blessings and blessings prayers and whatever else. Anyway, this one I tried to use blessing language, right? So here's our closing blessing. May Christ, who met grief with compassion and scarcity with abundance, teach us to trust his provision, share his gifts, and become people who speak the language of abundance. Amen.
Your mother reminding you about your book report due next week. A loved one reminiscing, photographs, keepsakes, and library dues. We have planners, notebooks, sticky notes, and phones to aid us in the endeavor of remembering. It's a beautiful concept, remembering. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard to do. It's a word that carries weight, so much so that it's ingrained in our culture. I was reminded of such when Dr. Heggie spoke and brought up the movie, The Sheep Detectives, and looking at it in a spiritual light, and it reminded me of Jesus. Looking at the lamb, I was also reminded of the lion. So I'm going to ask y'all to remember with me to rewind your VHS tapes, and let's talk about The Lion King. Okay, warning, if you have not watched it, I have a great Sunday plan for you. Great Sunday night plan, but there will be spoilers. There will be spoilers for The Lion King. In the later half of the film, after how many years it takes for a male lion to mature, a friend of Simba finds him, and Simba is reminded of his past and told what is happening in the country. He is supposed to be king of Pride Rock, but after he ran away due to shame and lies, the villain has set up a tyrannical government system after convincing henchmen that they will be elevated and given a life of luxury if they take over the Pride lands. The economy sucks, antelope is expensive, women aren't taken seriously, expert advisors are thrown into jail, and the land is in ruins. Oh dear. This friend then pleads for Simba to come back again and that he's going to be able to fix all of it. He says, I'm not that anymore. I'm Buddhist. I don't believe in that stuff. I eat bugs now. I'm a vegan by standards of lions. I'm not your guy. He then runs away again. After running away a third time, he runs into a baboon who gives spiritual guidance and leads him to a river. He is placed in front of the water, and in his reflection it ripples and it changes, and he sees his father's face. He's then called by name in the voice of his father, of which he looks up, and the stars and the clouds part to show Mufasa. The following interaction happens. Simba, you have forgotten me. No, how could I? Simba cries back in disbelief. You have forgotten who you are, and so you have forgotten me. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. How can I go back? I'm not who I used to be. Then the famous line, remember who you are. You are my son and the one true king. Remember who you are. Remember, remember, remember. Mufasa dissipates. Simba then runs back home through the desert, listening to an excellent score of music. He returns home and takes back Pride Rock through a battle of fire, and of course, the henchmen turn on the bad guy. Figures. And the rains come and the land is restored after some time, after good stewardship. I can't help but see our own predicament in this movie. The enemy is terrifying and hope feels lost at this moment in the world. The Pride Lands are overrun with hyenas and the antelope are scarce. It's hard to feel equipped for such a time as this. But the blood of Jesus Christ says otherwise. Through the ultimate victory, the one that won it all, a path was paved for our adoption. With that comes an inheritance, a divine inheritance. Relationship with the God Most High, a home, a calling, an armor with sword and shield, and the guarantee that victory is already won. So when the enemy seems larger than life and fear grips you tight at night, remember who you are, a child of the victorious one, equipped with the armor of God and called to serve in such a time as this. Now I would like to invite us to the table to gather the elements. Let us remember what a gift it is to remember who you are. And I'll close us out with a prayer.